Dr. Lassette Alvarez Holland, aka Dr. Lisa, coming here for episode 67 with the lovely Cheryl Fenner Brown. She will be discussing some of her integrative cancer care. It's around like 14 minutes in or so, her particular interventions that she uses and blends together in her system, as well as gives access to her specialty teacher training and whatnot. But one thing we do get into is how that holistic model really is coming out of ourselves as womanhood and that ministry and becoming these medicine women through the things we go through. Get into that path, as I often do here, with how a chance moment, flipping our own pain, can turn into a lovely journey of entrepreneurship and self-training and whatnot. This episode is sponsored by the Curvy Hustle Society. Curvy Hustle Society is the premier women's business club. It is going to evolutionize women's empowerment. At least I'm hoping that's my new baby, and we're coming out in March. If you go on over to www.drlisahollandpt.com, you can get on the Founders Perks list, where I'm going to give all of my yummy. I have 365 days right now of a free course to start to empower, re-engage yourself back into your personal power and self-love, just to get you started. This particular group comes out of my desire to make sure that there's the holistic leadership model that we all should be working into, but definitely women as we're evolving right now. I knew there was a space that we need, a safe space for leadership. Feminine leadership, feminine power, to really understand ourselves. It's very hard to hold your executive presence and to kind of inject yourself into things if you don't quite understand who you are. And in today's modern conversations of womanhood, I truly feel there's an anointing there, but we're kind of confused on like, what is it? We have all of these, intersectionality conversations, but have we actually grasped the polarities? I know we know the masculine. I know we talk about the toxic masculine, but we really don't talk about the toxic feminine. We really don't talk about some of the containers that we need, and we really don't understand exactly what we want sometimes when people are trying to be our allies. So this community is going to kind of dive into womanhood itself, going to make sure that the woman behind her brand is well supported, as well as not only understanding herself, but then her business. So the Mind Body Brand Academy is now inside the Curvy Hustle Society at a certain level, as well as Executive Life School, which is advanced women's studies on the mind, the body, energetics, really, really deep understanding of womanhood. Membership also has a full year, an annual business club that specializes in giving mentorship and support in masterminding with fellow spirited entrepreneurs who are established but are lacking a little bit of the clarity of exactly how to get their message to the masses in a way that feels good and allows for them to be evolving it and get their platforms ready. So I'm really excited to share this with you. All the information will be coming through emails. I'm going to be doing a lot of conversations off of social media, as well as inviting you through social media to some of those conversations. So get on the list again at www.drlisahollandpt.com. And make sure to get yourself some coffee or tea, get yourself some comfiness. Maybe you're getting onto the treadmill, maybe you're doing about your things. Get those earphones ready for the another episodes of Owning Her Health right now.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lassette. I do live in Central North Carolina right now, which is a far cry from where I originally started my yoga journey, which was in Oakland, California. So My story is varied, as many people's are. I never would have imagined 25 years ago that I would be here now. Like, this was the furthest thing from my mind. Like, I was a software trainer. So I was traveling around the country and even around the world at times, doing a training for a software company. And I loved teaching adults. But, that's a rat race kind of a job. You're traveling, you're staying in a hotel all the time. There's not healthy eating or imbibing habits going on. And I just felt like I was literally on a treadmill. And I hadn't been introduced to yoga yet at that time. And we're talking like I was probably in my late 20s. And I'm 50. I just turned 50 last year. So that was a while back.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be 50. I just you don't even understand. I feel like it
so
gives me a
different
little
now.
bit of age cred. So I would go to the gym and I would be on a literal treadmill, but I would be distracting myself from my exercise. I'd work out, I would have a book, some music, and I would also have a television nearby. And I was just going through the motions. I felt like my whole life was just going through the motions. I was doing what everybody else told me that I should be doing, have a good job, make money, but I wasn't happy. I was very unhappy. And I went to a yoga class at a random gym on a trip, a business trip, and I hated it because the teacher just would call out, downward facing dog, plank, and it was a vinyasa class. And I was completely lost. I mean, I was a gymnast, so I was not unaware of my body, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, I will never do that again. So then fast forward about another year or two, living in Oakland. I had moved from Virginia to Oakland, and actually was raised in Virginia. And after a really horrific, abusive relationship, so I was literally running away from that to get out, to get somewhere else and start my life over, or at least figure out what the heck I was doing with myself. And joined a gym and started to go to this gym. And this wonderful woman named Vicki Russell Bell taught a gym yoga class. And I remember the epiphanous moment was me standing in mountain position. And she said, feel your feet. And I thought, well, this is a weird thing to do. But I was just like the aha moment of, I'm doing one thing. I'm not doing 16 things, because the way that I was raised, the emphasis was on multitasking, getting more, just do until you basically do yourself into an early grave. And this was to do one thing, stand and breathe and notice what your feet are doing. So I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. It just shut up a lot of the input that I always am taking in and allowed me to actually be in the moment for once. So that was the beginning. After I had said, I'm never going to do yoga again, I started to do yoga regularly. The software job ended up, as I started to come into my own power, I knew that wasn't for me anymore, but I loved teaching adults, but teaching them something that they really didn't care about learning, that they were being told to go learn because of their job. It wasn't fun. So I decided to, once I got laid off from the software job, and this was like all around like the .bomb time out there, I said, can I become a yoga teacher as a career choice? And I talked to my teacher and she said, it's going to be really hard. You're not going to make any money, but yes, if that's what you really want to do, yes. So the school that she went to was Piedmont Yoga Studio, and I ended up doing there like really long. It was like 700 and something hours in the very first hit of training. It wasn't even for teachers. It was really for practitioners, just to like deepen their own practice. But I got exposed to an Iyengar style Hatha yoga with Richard Rosen, who's still one of my main teachers. He is a master pranayama teacher. And that taste of pranayama as a subtle practice was what kind of got me interested in the why. Like, why do back bends make us feel happier, lighter? Why do forward bends make us feel more relaxed and calmer? And that's what I wanted to know more about, the subtleties of how the physical body and your breath and energy and your mood can shift. And that was the sort of the push to go to the yoga therapy school. And that process took a good, from 2004 to 2015. So I was in school for a long, long time, and I spaced it out. I didn't do it like all at once. I spaced it out over time so that I could teach and I could process it. And at times it felt like I would never get to the end, but There is no end. It's become just my absolute passion to help other people try to find that moment of, oh, I can focus on myself and I can be content or more content with what I see inside of myself, as opposed to always feeling like something is wrong, I'm not good enough, I need to do more. So that's kind of what my goal is to share that and teach other people how to get to that place.
Beautiful. There's so much in there of what you say.
I know.
It's funny because 2016 or so, when I started this podcast, I definitely saw the distinction because of the healthcare system in terms of such an emphasis on men and all the science being done on them and this and that because it's so like technical and sort of authoritarian and whatnot. Which led me to become, bring in the yoga for many of the things that you said, that presence and focus and things like that. But there was also this other level of me, and it probably was my bias or whatnot, working in women's health and kind of being a woman and not really recognizing what was at the men's health as well, like just health in general. We're such at a disadvantage of thinking it's going to be fast and there's going to be a pill and there's going to be whatever. And it's even into our life choices. So you saying, this is a process. This was an evolution. We've been so taught to be in sort of fight the battle. It's a war zone. It's a battlefield. Fight, fight, fight. When the reality is actually we can breathe. That's what's so beautiful about yoga, because as you're physically practicing, you are also, it's a life school. It's a process. This isn't the war. This is actually not the battlefield. This is me. I'm coming home. That should be my place of peace. If it's not at peace, what am I sensing? So all of that is the beauty for those of you who don't practice yoga. I think you're missing out on that level if you've only worked with teachers that are kind of keeping it at the very superficial sensory physicality, or even, at some point, at the exercise of it. And it does get in your endorphins, and it does get some mental state shifts, and it does get some physiological things, but being able to actually go to life school in that, and it's going to be a process. You got to give it some time. You got to try to, like you said, several teachers, several mentors. So I appreciate you showing that, because, and I also appreciate you saying that you took action before it was done. So, what led you to get working with the chronic pains and the chronic illnesses and all of that through that? Because again, so many people kind of go with the elite athletes or the active whatevers, or, maybe I'll work with overweight people, or, what made you go to that population?
So when I was in my yoga training school, I worked with a woman named Joanne Lyons, who does classes for people with physical disabilities. And it was every kind of physical disability, things that I had never even heard of. And I assisted her for a decade when I was a new teacher. And there's a nonprofit called Piedmont Yoga Community, that funds those classes. And there was an organization that called the studio that wanted to link cancer patients with studios that would allow them to come to certain classes for free. And one of my champions is named Karen Dickman, and she said, we have a teacher who's getting yoga therapy trained. We might be able to get her to teach a class for cancer patients specifically. So we tried that. We tried in several local studios. And then eventually that turned into me actually teaching from a cancer support community out there in California. And I've never had cancer myself, but I do have a family history. My father died of cancer. My aunt died of cancer. And I was not able to help them because yoga was not in their parlance at all. And they were also really far away from me at that time. But, knowing how overtaking a diagnosis is for people, it changes everything in an instant when you hear the words, you have cancer. So the compassion that I was able to build by working as an assistant and understanding that truly every person is a little bit different in what they want, need, and can do and want to do. And that you can do a class full of people, some people that have, can't walk, some people who have missing limbs. They can all do the same pose. It's just all going to look a little bit different. That opened my mind up to understanding what adaptive and accessible yoga really is. So knowing what I knew about the immune system from my trainings, I developed this program incorporating movement, and then the subtle practices like you mentioned before. There's guided meditation called Yoga Nidra, mudra, which uses the hands to connect like the physical and the energetic and mental spheres, and then pranayama and guided imagery to help people access again that place of calm inside. And you mentioned the warrior. I am the warrior. That is something that we deal with a lot in the cancer community, and it really comes a lot from the doctors and the nurses. At least it did. It's starting to change with this whole survivor. You're gonna fight it. It's a battle. Cancer is something that is inherently in us. We don't need to like divorce ourselves from ourselves. And I feel like that language is so violent, and it doesn't take into consideration everybody's viewpoint on their disease and on their journey to health or journey to death. It's all a healing journey, whether we end up better or we end up not better. It's still a journey that we are healing into ourselves. So I feel like it's just the compassion to be able to sit in suffering with someone, especially in a private session, classes and privates, but knowing that there's always something that I can give them, maybe one or two small things that they can do that's going to make themselves feel better, that they can put in their toolbox to use when they're in that moment of panic or that moment of fear or that moment of discomfort. There's always something that's there from that yoga toolbox.
What I love about yoga work as a therapeutic intervention is that there's an inherent bridge where you turn into, you're coaching the person, you turn the therapist title over to them. And something such as cancer, which is really a disconnect, all disease I feel is a miscommunication. I don't think something's broken. I think it just didn't really understand what it was doing and gets disconnected and things like that. So to be thinking of us fighting and dissecting and segmenting is kind of insane. It really is insane, especially something that is inherently so fear-driven already. Why the hell are we making it more fear-driven in the healing community? And like you said, words are very powerful vibrations to bring into it. So, knowing what you know and going through what you did, I hear a woman that sort of went through her own trauma, went through her own healings, went through her own shifts, kind of saw herself in a whole new light, didn't even think, and then you're talking about this story where, another nice thing about this work is that you are accepting of the spirituality in your work. And so you can take that spiritual path as the healer, and realize that, it may not make sense to you how you're getting from A to B, but you've literally lived it. So you can kind of reflect that off on your people. If you could reflect back and talk to the person 10 years ago, Cheryl 10 years ago, knowing what you know now in your goddess wisdom of experience now, what would you whisper in her ear? Or what could you be whispering so that you can maybe resolve any of that healing of that level of you still?
Just that you'll get there. You'll just trust in the process. Because I think as teachers and as healers and as goddesses with this lived wisdom, we're in such a hurry because we feel like we don't know enough, we don't do enough, we aren't inherently enough. And I think just to remind her that you're enough now, and you can't rush to get to that place. You have to go through the fire and you have to suffer, unfortunately, in order to come out to the other side. And so many people, and I think women especially, we get stuck in the suffering. We think that that's the only way that we can be. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Don't push, just allow. It's almost like you have to allow. So, because I have a very fiery personality and I'm like, I want it to happen yesterday. So, and that attitude, it kept me on the path, but it didn't make it go any faster than it had to go.
Yeah, that is the false, right? The illusion that if we put the fire to it, it's going to make it go faster. And again, it's like, it'll be a catalyst.
Yeah.
But that next decision, whether or not it just burns you out and you have no vitality or you actually sustains you, is really kind of inherently what resiliency you've already brought up or what structure you have to begin with. And then on the flip of that, Cheryl, so knowing that we can influence the outcomes by our perceptions and our beliefs, and then really kind of our faith to kind of, again, there's a bigger picture there. I may not understand it yet. I may not be healed yet. I may not be in that level of class yet. If I were to say, okay, so let's just say your program, it does what it's going to do in the world. And I don't know how big you're thinking and what you're thinking, but let's say, everything went really ideally for you. What would you love to hear from Cheryl, 10 years from now in 2032, telling you right now to reassure you?
I think a lot of it is about trusting your intuition. And I think that practicing causes you to have more contact with your intuition, with that witness place where you can hear when you're on the right path and when you feel that you're deviating from like the path that's going to get you and create the greatest good, not just for yourself, but for the people that you're serving and working with as well. So I would just say, again, it's like trust yourself. I think the trust is key, that you're doing the right thing and that, you will be able to manifest. I am a full believer that we are divinely able to manifest what we may not always be what we want, but we are definitely able to manifest what we need. So I think just I'd come back to tell myself now that keep doing what you're doing, even though there's a lot of drudgery associated with it. Not with teaching, but I'm creating an app right now on my yoga encyclopedia, and I feel resistance. So because it's a lot of computer time, and I try to limit it as much as I can, because I know that I have fibromyalgia, so I know my symptoms get worse when I sit here in front of the computer and type a lot. But it's still just stick with what you know is going to serve the most people, and that these days has been my decision more than anything else. Can I serve more people teaching 10 public classes a week that have 3 or 4 people in them? Or can I serve more people by teaching other teachers to do what I do? Mm-hmm. And the second is going to make that happen more. Right. So I'm being called more and more to teach other teachers the method and just the work with cancer patients and the subtle work as well, the subtle yoga work.
Yeah. And I think that's an important, I say there's like a kind of a trinity of forces in the feminine power, which is, there's an aspect of what brings us personal power in general that I believe is having a firm identity, really, and that's not necessarily our form or what we've embodied, right? There's plenty of people that I know who I am, but maybe the package I'm coming in for the role I need to play or whatever, those are, I think some people sometimes get stuck in thinking their form or whatever at the moment is actually who they are in an identity. But when we have that in a dance and then we bring in a function or a purpose or something, I think that gives us a great sense of kind of like this little like power pack that we can kind of drive from, that you were sort of describing that fire, right? When you're matching that. And sometimes we're doing things that, again, it evolves and we move through these bigger seasons of womanhood that I think goes from like this maiden fire time, which looks a lot like the masculine fire time. I think we've grown to match that now in society. But there is this mothering time, and I think sometimes people can get confused again with the form, right? I didn't have kids. Yeah, but you might be birthing a business or an idea or
you're mentoring someone.
Mentoring, right? Like there's this like thing, and I think that's a very natural thing that women tend to kind of almost seek out. Like if they don't, I see them kind of like struggling when that phase is ending, and it's called menopause or perimenopause. It's almost like it's not resolved. But then you're speaking, now I've gone to this place of resolution on that enough where I feel like now I can go into that matriarch, that wise woman, that medicine woman role. And I don't think that's been massaged enough in our world, right? With such a kind of a patriarchy sort of filter on it. We haven't seen enough of those. We don't even see them in our homes anymore because we're not multi-generational. We're not seeing our grandmothers, or people are dying earlier than they should, and maybe we're not old enough to appreciate them. My grandmother died when I was 6. My other one when I was like I wasn't old enough to really be at a place in my development to really appreciate that. So you speak to that in you. And I think that's a really good representation of, yeah, we evolve. That's part of womanhood. I'm writing a book right now where I kind of am reframing womanhood, I think, is an anointing. I think it's not an alternative by chance genetic code. I think there's some souls that are like, I want this life school in this sacred, this ability to go to that, those phases to experience life and do that. So tell me a little bit before we close up, tell me a little bit about your programs, who they're best for. So anybody listening in, or even any of the other teachers that want to, utilize that, tell me a little bit more about that. And then where can we connect with you to get more?
Yeah, so I've developed a teacher training, and right now what we're moving into is a 50-hour healing yoga for cancer teacher training that is actually sponsored and kind of held by 8 Limb Studio in Seattle, Washington. So they run it. We did it in the fall of last year, kind of from summer to fall, and this year I think it's going to sort of be a little bit more towards the fall. The dates are not set for this year yet. But it is broken up into modules where you learn, it's all about cancer. You learn about asana, pranayama, mudra, sound practices, guided meditation, and then how to put all of that together for classes and for working with people with specific side effects from cancer treatment. Okay. That's the big program. I have
Is this for somebody that... are your programs, or do you have programs, or do you personally work with people who are not necessarily at the end of their treatment, but like actively get the diagnosis, or going through the treatment?
Yeah, so I have free classes that are sponsored by the it's called NorCal Carcinet, which is a sponsor. It's a support group for people with neuroendocrine tumors. And they actually, anybody can come though. It's a free class on Tuesday afternoons. That is for people who are, whether they're newly diagnosed or are long-term survivors of any kind of cancer. And we could do a chair class, yoga nidra, a mat class, restorative, and then a subtle practices class once a month. We kind of rotate the topics.
Okay.
So you can come at any time, register before you come. It's a free class. There are, I've got a Facebook group for, it's basically just called Healing Yoga for Cancer for patients and teachers. And it's just videos of me teaching. So if you want to kind of see what it's about, you can check that out. And then I have a website called yogacheryl.com. And that website has been my baby for as long as I've been teaching, 2005 about. And in that website, there are just, it's thousands of hours of information about mudra, all the practices that I teach. There's a mudra encyclopedia that's got about 200 mudras on it with photos and instructions on how to do it and why you would do it. I'm turning that into an app. So that's the part that I'm kind of in the middle of right now. I was hoping to get it done by January, but that hasn't happened yet. It'll get there. Trust the process, right? Take my own advice. Right. That's going to be in all the app stores. I'm hoping by the later spring. The mudra piece will be the part that I start with, and it'll be, like a regular app where you can purchase a subscription for it. And that would be for teachers or for practitioners that are interested in learning more about some of the subtle practices. And there'll be little videos with the instructions on how to do the mudras and photos and all that kind of good stuff.
That sounds amazing. And again, isn't it funny how here I go, seems like not connecting the dots, but like software engineer, software trainer. Now I'm making an app. Not only that, but I'm making an app, and it's going to come out at a time that we've been 2 years in this global pandemic with a whole bunch of long haulers, which happen to act a lot like my chronic fatigue and my, so it's like you have this history where you were being prepared. And again, I can't stress enough to anyone listening to it. We have been conditioned into a place where it's too much preparation is going to limit your success, and kind of willpower ourselves through, reason ourselves through, make it logical. Those higher faculties are important, but there is that feminine side of, let me have some imagination time. Let me have some creativity time. And I don't know about you, but I get creative when I'm in the shower. I'm not creative when I sit here and I say, okay, it's creative time. Yeah. It doesn't work because they're two different energies.
Yeah, it has to be organic.
I think that's when we get it. And so inspiration strikes. So getting that balance, I just see that all in you. So we will have all those, we'll get all those places on the show notes. So you guys can go to the main show notes page and get that, or if you're listening on, any of the podcast apps and things like that, please do leave a little, little review of this, or any sort of comments if you see the option to do that, like on the YouTube and this and that, so we can have some feedback. And I will definitely get any questions or anything that you want to say back to Cheryl, and she can reach out to you if you don't reach out.
I teach public classes as well, not many. I teach a yoga nidra class once a week, and a adaptive asana class that combines everything through the Mindfulness Center in Bethesda, Maryland. It's all online. So that's all. Those are like, if you're not a teacher or you're not a cancer patient, you can still study with me if you want to and see what it's all about.
Very good. So there's a lot for everyone. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, for your time and for sharing yourself and your story on owning her health. And guys, if you feel you have an owning her health story, if you know somebody that's flipped their pain, turned it into some sort of project passion, a lot of times they're going to make a profit over it. If they're smart as a woman, they'll do that regardless of their being taken care of financially by somebody else. Reach out to me and let me know. I'm always looking for people to be on the show with that wonderful story. I thank you so much, Cheryl. I think it's super important that we share our stories, and we'll see you next time on Owning Her Health.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.